Hey, cool kids. Welcome into another episode of the Cool Grandpa Podcast. Eileen Kopsaftis is a physical therapist, nutrition educator, author, speaker, and founder of Have Lifelong Wellbeing. For decades, she has helped people improve mobility, reduce pain, and challenge the conventional assumptions surrounding aging. Through her books, online programs, educational resources, and coaching, Eileen teaches practical strategies that help people remain active, independent, and engaged throughout their lives. You guys are really going to enjoy this conversation I had with Eileen because we really dive into mindset. We dive into why being mentally alert, being physically able to get down on the floor with kids, being able to even take a long car ride to go see those grandkids is such an important part of the grandfather, grandmother lifestyle, right? As we get older, we've got to stay active both mentally and physically. And a lot of times those family relationships, those friendships we have, and especially those relationships with grandkids is a big driver in for us to stay healthy and keep moving forward. Hey, I want you to be sure to go over and check out the store at cool-grandpa.us. Check out the polo shirts, the ball caps, all the great stuff I have over there to show that you have an awesome grandfather or that you are an awesome grandfather. Be sure to check that out. A lot of the stuff that I have, the polo shirts, the ball caps, all that stuff, the coasters, everything, a lot of it can be well used during these hot summer months. So without further ado, let's jump into this conversation with Eileen. Hi, Eileen. Welcome to the Cool Grandpa Podcast. I'm excited to have you on to talk about wellness and aging.
Yes, I'm very excited to be here, Greg. I love this topic. It's become my life's passion, and I really hope we help a lot of people with this.
Well, you're certainly going to help me at any rate, because as a grandfather, I kind of know that being a grandfather means that we're starting to progress more and more towards that older side of life than we would sometimes like to. So this will be a great conversation for us.
Yeah, I've got lots of practice being a grandparent. My oldest grandson is 25, and my youngest grandson just turned 1. So, and I've got 2 others in between.
You've got this, boy, you're shifting gears all over the place with those age ranges.
Yes.
That's awesome. Hey, I would love for you to give us a little bit of a background about how you got involved in lifelong wellness and aging and some of the work that you've been doing.
Yeah, so well, it's interesting because, when I started my profession, I was fascinated with the human body. Originally, I wanted to be a doctor. Then I wanted to be a nutritionist. And I realized I didn't really agree with the medical model or what they were teaching in nutrition at the time, because it was the 4 food groups. And I'd always been fascinated by the human body. So I became a PT. And right out of the gate, I was trained differently. I had a mentor that taught me so much, and I was able to really help a lot of people. It wasn't like those cattle clinics, where people go in and out and you hear them in line at the grocery store. Oh, I had PT. It didn't work. Well, they didn't really have PT. They had somebody who didn't really know what they were doing is the problem. And our profession has a huge bell curve on knowledge and skill. So that said, I started doing lectures for a company that promoted nutrition and was really talking about aging and how you really didn't need to decline. And then I transitioned into pain because nutrition does impact pain. People don't realize how much it does. And so I think it snowballed from there because of those talks I did for that company. And I just, when the world shut down, I had already been doing my side business, I call it, where I was teaching nutrition classes. I would feed people 4-course meals to show them that good food tastes good. And so many of them would say, oh my gosh, I would have never made this recipe ever looking at this, but this is delicious. I can't wait to go home and make it. And they were simple recipes with real food we recognize, it wasn't anything you had to go to some special store to buy. And so, those nutrition classes were extremely successful. People, lowered their A1Cs, people lost weight, people who were concerned about cardiovascular disease saw improvements. And so and even diabetes. And so it was so successful that I just kept going, and I started teaching classes at the local community college on nutrition and on pain, different classes, back pain and knee pain. And because most people have no clue that where they experience the pain isn't really where the problem is. Most people don't understand the connection in the human body. And so they're chasing their tail trying to get rid of something. And so when people learn this, it just changes their lives. And so now I'm just on this mission where, I wrote my 2 books, one on pain, one on aging, and I'm on this mission. People need to know this information. It's not mainstream knowledge, but it should be. And so that's why I'm here.
Yeah, well, one of the things that's been interesting, I think, and you tell me, but I believe there's a bit of a shift that's starting to go on where people are realizing that all the processed food and some of the things that we consume that we've been told has been healthy and good for us and everything else actually starts to lead to or contributes to joint pain, to some of these things. And I think people are starting to become a little bit more aware of looking for the fresh and natural alternatives versus the freeze bag stuff.
Yes, yes. And I remember a couple in their 80s. She was adorable and she was using a cane. She'd had joint pain for decades. And she said, as long as she called it my regimen. She goes, as long as I follow your regimen, I don't have any joint pain. So, I could tell story after story after story. I've seen it work.
Sure, sure. Well, and that kind of leads us into a little bit with the question I've got in terms of I think as we're starting to see fathers and mothers that are starting to become grandparents, and that could be anywhere in, I mean, it could be late 30s, but typically it's later 40s, 50s, 60s, and so on. I think a lot of us go from not thinking in terms of running around with rugrats and grandkids to that becomes a priority for us. And how does that shift in wanting to have more energy, wanting to have more flexibility, strength? How does that start to really change the way we think about aging overall?
Yeah, that's a really good question, Greg. I run an online academy, have Lifelong Wellbeing Academy, and my students, I call them my students, but they're like 60 plus, some 70s, some in their 80s, and they want to reject the mainstream narrative we've been fed all our lives that we're supposed to decline. And they're doing everything they can to prevent that and or radically reduce it. And they're doing fabulous. And one of them I'll never forget, she said she had a granddaughter. She was, I think, a year and a half old. And she said she wanted to be able to get down on the ground and play with her. She wanted to be able to interact with her. And so she worked really hard, did the work on restoring strength and all of those things. And I'll never forget the email I got from her. She goes, I got to sit down on the step with my granddaughter and play. It was some game. I'll say pat a cake. I don't think that was it. But her email was practically glowing because she was so happy and so excited. And I think we want to be able to get down on the ground and play with our grandkids, and a lot of us didn't realize that, oh my gosh, I got weaker. I struggle to get on the floor and to get back up. I need to like grab the sofa to get off the floor, and it kind of surprises us because we didn't realize that insidious decline had happened. But it has nothing to do with age. And that's the most important piece because so many people think it's because you're getting older. It has nothing to do with it. It's activity related, not age related. It's the fact that you haven't gotten on the floor in 10 years. That's why, I mean, your body forgot how to do it. It's like, you haven't made me do this in 10 years. Why are we doing it now? So it's really important to understand. And the best part, Greg, is that you can restore what's been lost. The human body is not designed on a cellular level to decline. And it doesn't matter how old you are, you can always get stronger. You can always get more mobile. You can always get more functional. You can always get more stable. Does not matter your age. And I know this because up close and personal, I've worked with people over 100 years old and gotten them stronger doing squats and parallel bars. So it's age is just a number. It does not determine your function.
Okay. Okay. Well, and I like that you brought that up because one of the things, I don't know, maybe because it's summertime but I used to be able to jump out of the bed of a pickup truck and not even think about it, right? And climb in, climb out, jump down, it's about like 3 feet, 4 feet, maybe bend the knees, not a problem. Get up, walk away, pull out a bag of whatever. But now in my late 50s, I'm looking at that same thing and going, "Oh, no, that's bad." But I'm also torn between like, "Wait, I need to work up to getting back to that."
Yes, you do. My husband is going to turn 70 his next birthday, and he works a very physical job at FedEx. He's a package handler, and he never knows when he goes to pick something up if it's 10 pounds or 100 pounds. And I mean, he's lugged tires and refrigerators and he's loading these trucks, and he works circles around the younger people. They're in their 40s or whatever, and they're saying, "Oh, well, I won't be able to do this job when I hit 50." And he'll just look at them. "Do you know how old I am?" I mean, it's too funny. So now he started the job, I think it was about 10 years ago. And I tease him a little bit when he complains about having to go in the middle of the night. I say, "Well, you could retire." He goes, "No, I'm paid to stay in shape." And so, because he knows he wouldn't exercise.
Yeah, that's so I'm in Atlanta and I used to work at UPS and would have some of the same people, and some of these guys would show up working shifts, loading trucks and things, and they would be out of shape and they would never go to the gym because all that picking and twisting and moving and everything else that just kept them into shape. And that
Yeah,
was
absolutely. Physical labor will do that.
I I joked with my boss that, "Hey, I need to go do that about 2 times a week and, just to keep things going," and he was like, "Yeah, I'm not letting you go do that. You're just gonna hurt yourself." What's one of the or is there a correlation between energy levels and getting older? Because certainly if we haven't been down playing with the kids, if we haven't been jumping out of the bed of pickup trucks, that's function that we can either regain or we can build back up. But what about our energy levels as we start to get older?
Well, our energy levels are determined by our food intake, whether we hydrate well enough or not. Fatigue can be because of just not drinking enough water. And a lot of people, when they get older, they don't want to drink water because it means they have to go pee. And I always joke, it's like, that's how it works: water in, water out. When you were in your 20s, you didn't care if you had to go to the bathroom 10 times a day because you were drinking a lot of water. Why does it bother you now? It's just that's just kind of how it works. But not being hydrated, your muscles are 78% water. So your muscles are going to struggle to function well. You're not going to gain muscle if you're not drinking enough water. And again, nutrition is huge. What gives us energy is foods that have energy, which is plants. I mean, you can take a raw potato and buy one of those kits and stick a little thing in it and it'll run a clock, right? So it has energy in it. The same thing with an apple. But if you cook the apple, clock isn't going to work. So, and I'm not saying you got to eat everything raw. I don't want people to hear
Right,
what
right,
I'm
right.
not saying. But the point is, we need to be eating foods that provide nutrition for our body so that we will have that energy. And then a lot of the times too is because we don't realize that we've lost muscle over the years because we haven't been working them. That also will impact your energy levels, because if just squatting down takes more energy than it used to because you don't have as much muscle, now you're depleting your energy levels more than you would have. The same with your cardiovascular system. If you've gotten to the point where climbing a flight of stairs makes you a little bit short of breath, it's time to start doing a little bit of aerobics. Yeah.
Yeah. Like you said, the building block or the base for all of this, it starts out with nutrition, and then it sounds like movement, and then it sounds like it just kind of builds from there. What are some of the differences that we face as from a nutrition standpoint? Maybe somebody that's, let's say, 50 and under and somebody 50 and older, because I find too, um, whether it's myself or friends, we all seem to start having these subtle changes in diet, whether it's eating less, eating more of one food or less of another food. What are some of those differences that maybe people might be noticing?
Well, I haven't really observed that there's a transition in food intake. I mean, I'm not saying that, you're not correct. I haven't really observed that. I mean, if someone is sort of changing their food intake, if you're eating less, a lot of that is because you aren't using as much energy. So your body is going to kind of calculate what you need in calories. And if you're not burning them, it's going to, I mean, a lot of people start to put weight on because they are consuming the same number of calories, but they're using up less calories because they're less active. So the body starts to store. So there are some different reasons for that. Absolutely.
How would we go about adjusting or working with you or another nutritionist um, because of needing to make those adjustments and needing to realize like, hey, I've started putting on weight. I really need somebody to help me look at not just the calories, but what it is that I'm eating and how much I'm eating and what it is that I'm starting my foundation at.
Well, it really is pretty simple to eat healthy. Unfortunately, there was a poll that was done, and when they surveyed Americans, they found that Americans said about 50% of them said, it's easier to do my taxes than it is to know how to eat healthy. And so that's kind of scary. But a lot of that has to do with the fact that we're inundated, the media, the AI, all this stuff that's at us all the time gives us completely different opinions, completely different data. It's like, okay, I need to be eating a lot more protein and no carbs, or no, I need to be eating lots of carbs, but they need to be healthy and complex carbs, and anywhere in between. I mean, I can understand why the public's confused. So what I found, kind of the secret question is, if you're going to take advice from someone, and I'm not necessarily saying don't go to a nutritionist. However, nutritionists are very, very focused on how many grams of this, how many grams of that. Are you getting enough of this specific vitamin? Are you getting enough? And they're going to be like isolating things. And that's not how the body works. T. Colin Campbell, who wrote the China study that I highly recommend to people to read because it's the largest study in the world that relates chronic diseases to food. And it's very well written. It's written for the layperson. You don't have to be an expert in any of those fields. But he also wrote a book called Whole, Whole. And in that book, he clarifies that nutrition is not about all these little tiny things that are in there, all these phytonutrients, that's not how the body functions. So when you see studies on, this vitamin or this nutrient or this, it's not going to be accurate because it's not, the body functions on whole food and it extracts what it needs. Like if you eat broccoli today, your body's going to extract what it needs from that broccoli and eliminate the rest. Tomorrow, your body may extract different amounts of different things from that very same broccoli because tomorrow you need something different. So the human body is so complex when it comes to nutrition that we just need to be eating whole food. So it's not that challenging. The problem is there's so much confusion out there. And so what I try to tell people is if someone's going to advise you, ask them how long they've been doing what they're doing and how many people have they helped. And that's what matters the most. When I earned my diploma in nutrition education, it was a 900-hour program. It was taught by Wellness Forum Institute, which is not industry funded. So there was no bias. There was no conflict of interest. It was purely data driven in the things that we learned. And the experts that I studied under, physicians and other healthcare experts, for 30, 40 plus years, they've been getting people well. They've been restoring their health, eliminating the symptoms that required medications. Just, people reversing type 2 diabetes, for people who should have died because cardiovascular disease was so advanced in their body. And 10 years later, that person is still going strong. So I believe your track record speaks for itself. And so it's important, a lot of people have written best-selling books on all these different diets. But a lot of what's in those books is theoretical because a lot of those doctors, people don't realize that a lot of those doctors are not practicing medicine. they're not working with a patient population. And so they can't tell you what their advice actually does to people. So it's important to find somebody who has a really good track record.
Mm. And so is that information typically easily available on the internet if somebody wants to either look up a potential doctor consultant, or are there other ways that people need to be able to find that information about a provider?
Yeah, unfortunately now, especially because of AI, when you've searched for something, AI now knows what you're interested in and it's going to keep giving you more of the same. So you won't really get a balanced reporting of that topic, because if you click on a link, it's going to think, oh, they want to know more about that. So then they're just going to keep giving you more of the same. So it makes it very difficult. I do think, and I really wish I had a magic answer for you. There are many experts that I recommend. There's Dr. Caldwell Esselstyn, Dr. Neil Barnard. He's the founder of Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine. Their website is very accurate in the data and the information that they provide for nutrition. Dr. John McDougall, he passed away recently, but he has such a strong content presence. His family has continued his legacy, and you can go on his website and get meal plans and recipes. And he is someone who for 40 plus years made people well, and his data is very compelling. So there are experts out there. I mean, if people want to contact me, I can recommend people. Absolutely.
Yeah, no, that would be helpful. The other thing I was wondering about is sometimes in academia and in other professions, you can almost follow the tree or the branches, right? And is that still the case with some of the people that you've mentioned? If they've had students or colleagues that have branched out to their own practice, is that something that you could follow back and go, okay, they may not be exactly the same, but they studied under this person and they're probably following the same types of protocols?
Yeah, but for the most part, if they've studied under that type of knowledge and skill and efficacy, in other words, what they do works, then they're not gonna veer from that at all. They're gonna ensure that they have the same results and success with the
Okay.
people they work with. Absolutely. Yes.
No, that's awesome. Because I know sometimes it might be easier to find out who studied under who, or who was related, or who started a practice
Yes,
after a
yes.
period
Oh,
of time.
absolutely. I remember studying under someone learning manual skills, and he had studied directly under Moshe Feldenkrais, which a lot of people remember Feldenkrais for his work with children and neurological disorders and how he restored movement to these kids who had really serious spasticity and things. And then he also studied directly under Ida Rolf, and a lot of people have experienced Rolfing. It's a very specific type of deep tissue massage. And so he studied directly under both of these people. And then I got to learn from him, which was awesome. So yeah, it's kind of cool when you can find somebody who studied under somebody who's brilliant. Yeah.
That's fantastic. Yeah, no, I think that's going to help a lot of people out, especially as they're starting to want to get more involved, whether it's nutrition or whether it's just movement and strengthening.
Yeah. And the movement is key, Greg, because a lot of the times people decide, okay, I can't get on the floor and play with my grandkid. I got to start strengthening. They go to the gym, they do a bunch of stuff that just causes injury, and then they're depressed and they don't know what to do. And now they got pain. So it's really important to make sure you get guidance when you start training your body. And unfortunately, a lot of the fitness industry doesn't really understand the connection, and they isolate muscles, which is what causes tendonitis and tendinopathy and tendinosis, because the human body isn't designed to isolate. And I'll give this tiny little example. So if I'm standing in a machine and I'm pushing my foot to bend my knee to strengthen my hamstring, that is a very inauthentic movement. The hamstring will get bigger, it will get stronger. The problem is that's not how it's designed to work, to press against resistance repetitively in that motion. And I've asked people, I want you to tell me any movement, anywhere, sports, physical, anything, that we move our foot that way against resistance. Nobody can tell me. So, but yet
Yeah.
we,
Well, I think, well, you let me know what you think, but I would assume that a lot of this started with the bodybuilding. I don't want to say fad, but as it became more and more popular 50s and 60s, that you had these machines that were being built to isolate biceps and hamstrings and quads. And okay, that's great. That helps that individual muscle maybe. But it, to your point, that's not the same as a farmer who's tossing bales of hay onto the back of a trailer.
yes, yes. And when you go downstairs, you're loading your quads, you're loading your hamstrings. When you go to sit in a chair, you're loading your hamstrings, you're loading max, gluteus maximus. So when you do squats, when you do lunges, those are real functional motions. And so when we isolate things, we promote aggravation to the tendons because your body is saying, what are you doing? How come I'm trying to do this all by myself and none of my friends are helping me? I mean, when you go to pick up a bag of heavy groceries and lower them down, your whole body's involved. You're leaning forward, you're squatting, you're using your power source, you're pushing through the floor. You're not just, it's kind of like I tell people if they're in an airplane and they go to put their overhead, their suitcase in the overhead compartment, they're not saying, I better make sure that I keep my elbow bent and I keep it by my ear and I only use my tricep. Better make sure I don't use any other part of my body to do this. No, you're squatting down a little, especially if it's a heavy suitcase, and you're going to push through the floor and you're going to use your whole body to get that overhead. Why do we think that, we need to isolate those things in workouts? It's because the fitness industry that's what they've been teaching for decades, and it's inaccurate and it actually causes more injury. I can't tell you how many patients I worked with in the clinic who had tendonitis because they went to the gym 3 and 4 times a week and they were isolating everything. So, yeah.
Yeah. So with somebody that has, I don't know, let's say that they're an office worker, or they just haven't had a profession that's kept them that active, and now the grandchildren are starting to come along, or they're even getting interested in, I don't know, pickleball or joining a hiking group. How would you recommend them to start getting that mobility back and increasing that mobility when we've just talked about, like, maybe not going to the gym and sitting on the leg curl machine is the best way to start? How would you advise people to start getting that movement back and that endurance back?
Yeah, well, I will give a shameless plug to my Move Without Pain private club because it's free. There's a free level membership. So I'm not trying to sell anybody anything. All I want to do is help people. And that's why the free level is there. And there's an assessment video where you do a 3-plane assessment of your body. There's 6 movements. You do them on the right side of your body, the left side of your body, and you learn where you've lost motion and you learn where maybe that's why my knee hurts because my left hip doesn't rotate. I mean, you figure these things out, and that's what the assessment is all about. I give very clear instructions in the video how to modify if you've got pain. And then there's a workout that begins training you for mobilizing your body, for restoring the mobility to the major joints, which is what most people lack, especially if they haven't done it for years. And it's really important. And ankle function is huge. Most people completely ignore ankle function. If you've got knee pain walking downstairs, it's probably your ankles. I mean, there's so much about ankles. I've cured people's neck pain, shoulder pain, knee pain, low back pain by restoring ankle function. It's a huge piece that most people overlook. And I do focus on that in a lot of my teaching because I've seen how much people need it. So, but that I would highly recommend that because you're going to get that authentic movement. You're going to restore 3-plane function because we move forward and back, side to side and turning. And most of the exercises done in a gym are just in one plane of motion. So it's not going to restore full mobility. Yeah.
Yeah. So a question I've got kind of following this up is because we've got two things that we're talking about a little bit. And one is, okay, how do we stay active? How do we stay healthy? How do we feed the engine and keep it well lubricated through movements? The other part of that too is I know growing up that as a little kid, when I realized my grandfather was probably my age or less, but he seems so old that I grew up with this idea that when you start to hit ages or you get the gray coming in on the mustache or the sideburns, that decline is just inevitable, that you're going to get old, that you're going to do these things. How much of that is truly just inevitable, and how much of that is, I don't want to say giving up, but just that acceptance that this is how it's going to be?
Yeah, it kind of becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy because it's what you believe. And what we believe becomes our reality. I mean, if I believe I'm going to decline, I'm right. If I believe I can do something about it, I'm right. So, in my book, Aging Culprits, the first chapter is on mindset and belief. And that is massive because if you don't reject the mainstream narrative that you're supposed to decline, you're supposed to end up on 12 medications, and you're supposed to need disposable underwear, and you're supposed to end up needing a walker, and you more than likely will end up at a nursing home if you live long enough. I mean, that's accepting the narrative, and it's not accurate. I can tell you, I've worked with so many people literally over 100 years old, and this is when I was working acute care in the hospital setting, and they would come in because they got a really bad cold. It became pneumonia, and they'd be in the hospital for maybe a day or two. But then they'd go home and they're cooking, cleaning, shopping, driving, doing their own finances. They're living life large, completely independent, and they're over 100 years old. So obviously they didn't believe the narrative. I did home care and I saw a massive difference. If I worked with somebody who was way up there in years, in their 90s or more, and I saw that, they like to drink water. They were okay with exercise. I would, be giving them strengthening exercises and things. They had a bowl of fruit on the kitchen counter. And then I would see someone who was only in their 60s and they're sitting in the chair. They got the walker in front of them. I'm trying to motivate them to get up and do some exercise. Oh, I've never exercised. I hate exercise. I don't drink water. I hate water. Water, da, 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 da. And their kitchen counter was just loaded with, I'll be blunt, crap, like sweets and just all kinds of garbage. And so I've seen that narrative. I mean, up close and personal. It's huge. And, I actually have this thing that I wrote up on my website called the 7 pillars of lifelong well-being. The first one is mindset. And then it's movement. And then it's hydration. You've got to be drinking enough water. And then it's making sure you know what you're doing, get good guidance. I mean, if you were going to go down the Amazon, you wouldn't go by yourself. You'd get a guide, right? And then it's community. If everybody around you is talking about their disease processes, their symptoms, their times at the doctor, their medications, their, oh my gosh, getting older isn't, blah, blah, blah. I think it was Betty Davis who said getting older isn't for sissies. So, but the thing is, if you're surrounded by that, that's not a good environment to be in. You've got to find people who've decided that's not true, and they're going to prove it. And so that's one of the things I love about my academy. It's a community where these people have decided that, and they support each other and they encourage each other. And then of course, consistency is key. I mean, you can't, do 45 squats today and then 3 weeks from now decide to do 10 more. You have to be consistent, even if it's a small change. Like I tell people, if you're sitting all day, every hour, get up, do 10 back bends and 10 squats. You'll be shocked at how different you feel by the end of the day. And that's such a simple thing. It's not, you don't have to go to the gym for 4 hours a day. I don't go to the gym for 4 hours a day, but you have to do something and you have to be consistent.
Well, that's great advice. One of the things that struck me while you were talking about that is, for me, I've been doing whitewater kayaking down here in the Southeast, and this idea of mindset, there's some of these rivers that are, good intermediate level rivers. But there's some guys out there I know that are in their late 70s and 80s that are out there still kind of beep bopping along and running through 4-foot rapids and all sorts of things. And 4 foot doesn't sound very big until your bottom's really on the zero on that 4 foot. and then all of a sudden that looks pretty big and it's moving pretty fast. But, I think a bunch of us have talked about like, man, I want to be that old guy that's got the old gear, but he's out on the river on the weekends and doing these things. And so it's kind of motivated us a little bit to make sure our shoulders don't get dislocated and that we're safe, and but that we're still out moving around and doing those things so that we can enjoy the rivers and we can enjoy those activities when we're old.
Yes, absolutely. I agree 100%. And, and you can go on YouTube and get very encouraged. If you just type in, older people doing this, older people doing that. I've done 39 online events in the last 5 years, and I would always try to find something inspirational. And I found a woman in her 90s who was still doing ballet on point.
Wow.
So, I mean, there was one where these women were doing powerlifting. They were in their 80s and 90s doing powerlifting. And they didn't look like anything special. I mean, they did, they
Right,
weren't
right.
muscle bound and could wear the spandex and look good. They were older women, and it was phenomenal to watch them pushing something that weighed hundreds of pounds or lifting. And one of them had a goal that when she hit, I think she said when she hits 80, she wants to be able to lift, I think it was 200 pounds or something. But I mean, you can really be inspired. There are so many people out there. One woman was 103 and she ran a certain distance in like a minute and something. I mean, 103. So there's a lot of people out there doing it. We just need to pay attention to them.
That's
I
awesome. And for folks that are listening and watching, in the show notes, I'll go to YouTube, find a couple of those, and put those into the show notes as well, just to make it real easy for
Yeah,
folks to
yeah.
see a couple of things that hopefully inspire them.
And I will caution, there are times because people are looking for clicks. And so there are times where they'll fib about the person's real age. So when I see the name, I'll research their name and I'll see, oh, they're not actually 102. They're 93, So, but that 102 makes everybody want to click. So I do want to, caution that.
Okay. Okay. Well, good. I'll take a look at that as well when I find one or two of these clips to put on there.
They're very inspirational.
So, as you've worked across people with lots of decades of life, have you noticed a correlation or relationship between levels of fitness and agility and their personal relationships? And if so, what has been that relationship?
I think what I've seen for, that, especially that population that was like over 100 and very independent, they were very social. They were spending time with family. They had friends. They did have social connections. They had maybe card games they went to, or they had these regular meetings with friends and people they cared about. And I think that's one of that, that blue zones thing. I think that's also one of that too, that when you've got healthy relationships with other people, it does help you absolutely on so many levels.
Okay. That's because I thought that would be probably the case, but I didn't know whether, from your own experience with clients and seeing that, if that was something that felt like it was right, but I wasn't sure. Now, Eileen, for listeners that want to know more about your work, your books, and the programs, what's the best way for folks to reach out to you and get in contact and follow you and even take the assessment?
Yeah. So, well, the assessment is on my private club website, and that's MWP for Move Without Pain. So it's mwpprivateclub.com. But I think probably my favorite way to provide information to people, because I've got 8 different websites and I've got so much content out there. I mean, I've got my YouTube channel. I've had people contact me and go, I don't know where to go. I don't know what to. And so what I did was I created a very simple 5-question quiz on my main website. And when they answer that, it brings up a page that shows all the resources for that issue that they're concerned about. Like maybe they're concerned about their balance or their joint pain or incontinence or, whatever. And so that's on the main website, which is Have Lifelong Wellbeing. And it's just 5 questions. It takes less than two minutes to answer. And it will provide whatever I've got that's free, whatever I've got that might be, they might need to invest in a course. But yeah, I think it really helps people not get lost in the weeds.
Well, that's great. We'll be sure to put the links to all that into the show notes as well. And just a shout out, was on your YouTube channel, and for because it's summertime, grandparents are driving to see grandkids and driving around to go to state parks and national parks. You've got a great video on being able to take some of those longer car rides and stretching out and not showing up where you have to just like roll out of the car and then put an ice pack on for a few hours.
Yes, absolutely. If you've got to drive long distances, there's some great advice on there. And I'm not saying it's me because I'm not all that brilliant. I'm just really gifted at finding brilliant people and learning what they know. So,
That's awesome. And Eileen, is there anything about aging, about movement, nutrition that we haven't covered or touched on that you would like to bring up before we say goodbye?
well, I think one of the most important things is the fact that, people think we need to have disposable underwear before we go below ground. And that's not accurate. And so many people are struggling and suffering and having to wear those things. And there's really simple ways to improve that with movement, fully clothed and upright. And so there's just, don't just settle for what you're experiencing, because if it's reducing the quality of your life, there's always something that you can do to improve it. You just need to know what, and don't just accept it because it's not normal. Just because we see something everywhere we look, that means it's common. It doesn't mean it's normal. I mean, disease is common. Cardiovascular disease, diabetes, those are common. But the definition of disease is abnormal functioning. So disease is not normal, and neither is decline as we age. It is not normal. And I've met way too many people that are over 100 that prove that's true. So,
I love that. And I'll just tag on and let me know what you think too, is making sure that you find that motivation for changing up your diet if it needs to be changed up, or exercising. We talked a lot about grandkids because I think, and you tell me, but I think finding that key, that motivator is huge to starting out with what you said, the mindset, and then following everything else on.
yes, absolutely. But, motivation is external,
Yes.
and inspiration is internal. And so I think, and I've heard a lot of experts say this, your why has to be important enough for you to do what you're going to do. And I remember somebody saying once that, they needed to lose weight because they had cardiovascular disease. They had to really get their life in order. And then the why was because they had a grandchild and they wanted to be around for that grandchild when they grew up. Now that's a pretty important why. So we've got to decide, what's our why? Why do we want to do this? And if it's important enough, we'll do it.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Eileen, this has been a great conversation, and I know I'm probably going to reach out to you in the future to come back on, but really hope you have a really good rest of the day. And thank you, folks, for listening to us.
Thank you, Greg.
I had a great time talking with Eileen, and I really appreciate her taking time out of her day to sit down, talk with me, help me understand a little bit more about being active, having an active mentality, and not just giving in to this idea that just because we hit a certain age that we have to decline, that there are ways that we can keep our bodies moving, keep our minds sharp, and stay active so that we can really get out there, play around with the grandkids, but also make sure that we can take care of ourselves. Because as we get older, we want to be able to be as independent as we can, have the lifestyle that we want, and be sure to enjoy all those special relationships that we have. So I hope you've enjoyed this conversation with Eileen. Please go over, check out all of her materials. I've got links into the show notes so you can easily find out where she's at. And do me a favor, if this has helped you at all, please pass it along to a friend. And until next time, remember to stay cool.